Sangye che tang tsu ke che nan lai chen che paranto tane cham su ji tai ge jin so kim pe se nam ge cho la pin chi sangye do pa la sho sangye che tang tsu ke che nam lai chen che paranto Tane kyab so je tai ge jin so jin pe san nam je do la pin chi song ge do pa la la sho song ge che dong zo ki cho nam lai jan cho pa do tane kyab so je tai ge jin so jin pe san nam ge do la pin chi song ge do pa la la sho sim chen tam che de wa tong de ve gyu tong ten pa la ju che dong ge tong dong ge ge gyu tong che wa gyu che dong ge me pe de wa tong pa tong me che wa ju che nye rin cha tong tong che ve Tong nyum ching po la ne pa ju le che pe den sa ve Lama shen po che ta ge che wa pe me den cho la ka den chen pa kum ne che sun te ku sun to ge ngo do tsa la to so la chum den de chum pe yang la cha tsa lo kong ge lo de chen ne chen che le nye ta nam ta sha se ve Tian ye den ge sin xin sin chi le ni jie to ka le pam se Kong ta jin pe chun sha la ma re mun to dong le che ze ve Zhuo zuo kun la bu jie da zi yin la zhou ju yong ten song Zhuo zha zhe zhuo niu mo nie long li ge cha zhuo zhe zi jie Ma xie men ce le dong le niu gu jie nie zhe zi she de nam Den ne da ji sa jue da sun yin dian le zuo ge zi da wen guo Che da che dong che ne gen che da le men ce le jiang ba yang la de zhe den jie jie qian ra e se le ge da le dian mo sha se ne Ka tong ten je shun lo to pa ye Le den po pe non wa tsa le to so
Hello everyone, here and online. So we'll continue where we left off yesterday. We presented the title and the translation of the title. We saw the reverence of the translator. And now we'll start the first stanza of the text, which corresponds with the formulation of an homage and a promise of composition. I propose that we read it together to begin. The text says, Homage to the one who forever dissipated omnipresent obscurity, who pulls beings from the muck of samsara, and who teaches in accordance with reality. I will now perfectly state this treatise that is the treasure of the Abhidharma. So to explain this stanza, Khelzang Puntso began by explaining that we can divide it into two parts. The first part covers lines 1 through 3. That is Vasubandhu's offering homage. And then the fourth line corresponds with the promise of composition. So now we'll go into an explanation that is fairly methodological, very systematic. When one introduces a treatise, in fact, Vasubandhu explained that this stanza can be explained over the course of 5 points. Before we go over them, I propose that we just mention them to get them in mind, to have them in mind. The first point is the finality, the purpose. Second is the condensed meaning. In other words, the condensed meaning of the homage. Then we'll explain the meaning of the words, word by word. It's number 3. Then a fourth point that presents points of debate. Apparently in Tibetan, this is the term gal len. There is a certain clarification when there are objections. And then the fifth point, connecting with what follows. So those are the 5 points. So let's start with the first point. So the finality, as it is called, what's the point of this stanza, particularly the homage? Why does Vasubandhu begin by paying homage to the Buddha? Khelzang Puntso explained to us that when sublime beings, eminent beings, noble beings like Vasubandhu compose a treatise, it is important that they do not later abandon this promise. It can happen that sometime during the course of the composition of the treatise there are obstacles. And so in order to dissipate these obstacles, Vasubandhu is paying homage to the Buddha. He's invoking the Buddha's spiritual influence in order to prevent potential obstacles that could interrupt him writing this treatise. Khelzang Puntso also notes that there are different beings that an author can pay homage to, and different reasons why. So in this case, Vasubandhu is paying homage in order to prevent obstacles. So that is the condensed meaning. That's the first point. No, the first point was the finality, the point, the purpose, and this goes into the condensed meaning. Second point. So the second point is that of the condensed meaning. Here we're talking about the condensed meaning of the homage in particular. This homage, it shows us that the Buddha possesses a perfect personal benefit and also perfect benefit for others. So there are 2 benefits, one's own benefit and benefit for others. And in these 3 verses, the homage presents the 2 benefits that are present for a Buddha. These 2 benefits present for a Buddha are something that we can keep in mind. Buddha has perfect personal benefit and also perfect benefit for others. So this is the condensed meaning of the homage. Then comes the third point. That is the explanation of the meaning of the words. There are various words that are used in the homage, notably in the first line, where we say, "Homage to the one who forever dissipated omnipresent obscurity." So when we say the one who dissipated, who are we talking about? The one who does this refer to? Perhaps you know the answer, but in any case, this refers to the Buddha. No surprises there. The meaning of the one who is the Buddha. And then when we talk about omnipresent obscurity, what are we talking about? Here we're talking about obscurity that covers all phenomena as they are. Aggregates, ayatanas, dhatus, all these phenomena that were presented earlier on. The Buddha dissipated the obscurity of the ignorance that prevents one from seeing these phenomena as they are. He dissipated the obscurity of ignorance that prevents one from seeing the true mode of being of phenomena. So if we can give a bit more detail, we can say the Buddha dissipated the ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations and the ignorance that is not associated with afflictive obscurations. He has dissipated all ignorance. These two types of ignorance are something that we'll come back to in much more detail in our ongoing studies. So having dissipated these two types of ignorance, ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations and ignorance that is not associated with afflictive obscurations, having dissipated these two is what is called perfect personal benefit. That covered the first line. The second states who pulls beings from the muck of samsara. So we're going to spend a little time with this line, with these words. So in the second line, Vasubandhu explains or refers to perfect benefit for others that is present for a Buddha. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he wasn't content to just do nothing. He didn't stop everything. After he attained enlightenment, he also accomplished the benefit of others, and he did so perfectly. Through his teaching, the Buddha pulls beings from the muck of samsara. Here we're in the part explaining the meaning of the word, so we may ask ourselves, what does this word samsara mean? What does it refer to? This concerns going around and around in the cycle of existences since beginningless time, being reborn again and again, successively, since beginningless time. We can go a bit further. We may ask ourselves, what is the basis for this going around and around in the cycle of existences? Here, well, this is on the basis of the truth of origin, that we remain in samsara, in the cycle of existences. The truth of the origin of suffering, we talked about this already a bit over the last few days. We saw that it was twofold, that it concerns both acts and afflictive obscurations. On the basis of these phenomena, we take rebirth again and again. And so, while we're in the process of going over the words, we might ask ourselves, why does Vasubandhu refer to samsara as muck? Because when we enter into muck or mud, well, it's hard to get out of it. Once we're in, we have a hard time getting out. And when we're in it, we try to get out, but we have a hard time. We have difficulty walking. Whereas when we're on flat, dry ground, it's very easy to head forward. So the mud of samsara prevents us from liberating ourselves from the cycle of death and rebirth. This muck, this mud, this represents acts and afflictive obscurations. This is what causes us to remain in samsara. That was the explanation of the phrase, the muck of samsara. And there's the longer part, who pulls beings from the muck of samsara. So then we can ask ourselves, how does the Buddha pull beings out of the muck of samsara? First, it's important to know that the Buddha will liberate beings on the basis of his own compassion, on the basis of compassion. And how will he do this? He will teach beings things as they are, the true mode of being of phenomena. For example, he gave many teachings, but here in particular, the teaching on the four seals is cited. The Buddha explained how phenomena truly are. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent. All phenomena associated with factors for descent are suffering. It's a particular teaching he gave that shows things as they are. He taught, and the fact that he taught this teaching is what will get beings out of samsara. He showed things as they are. He taught how they are without error. And this is how the Buddha protects beings from the cycle of existences that is marked by suffering. That's the method he used to liberate beings. And this implies that the Buddha didn't liberate beings with miracles. Because, in fact, miracles are not what help beings get out of the muck of samsara, or cause them to get out of the muck of samsara. So we might still ask ourselves, okay, but how do we get out of samsara? By no longer being in the hold of misunderstanding, in the grasp of misunderstanding. When we understand things as they truly are, then we will be able to be free from samsara. And so long as we are in the hold of misunderstanding, in the clutches of misunderstanding, we will not be able to break free from the cycle of death and rebirth. For these three reasons, the first that Alexandra presented, the finality of the homage, the condensed meaning of the homage, and the more detailed meaning of the words, for these three reasons, Vasubandhu pays homage to the Buddha. And now Alexandra will continue with the fourth point. The fourth point, this relates to the points of debate, to address them if there are, to address any objections if there are some objections. The debate apparently here concerns the question, is there a difference in terms of the fruit between the state of Buddhahood and the state of Arhathood of the listeners and the Pratyeka Buddhas? The fruit, as we saw, according to the Vaibhashika, is called an arhat, the arhathood. And there are these three fruits, arhats, the listeners of the self-realized Buddhas and of the Buddha. So they're trying to understand what the difference is. Is it in terms of what they have abandoned? Is it in terms of their understanding? I'm going to follow the order, the way that Khelzang Puntso explained it. So there is a difference concerning the abandonment of afflictive obscurations. There's perfect abandonment, and then the other aspect of the fruit is understanding. And what we'll see in this debate is that concerning the abandonment of afflictive obscurations, both the Buddha on the one hand and the listener and self-realized Buddha arhats on the other hand, they have both perfectly abandoned afflictive obscurations. There's no difference from this point of view. However, concerning the other aspect, there is a difference. We'll talk about two types of ignorance. Khelzang Puntso explains, as Sylvester mentioned, we'll look at them in more detail later, but in any case, there is ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations and ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations. The first type of ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations, it is an obstacle to liberation. So long as this ignorance associated with afflictive obscuration is present, one cannot attain liberation. And both a Buddha and the arhats of both the listener and self-realized Buddha arhats have abandoned this ignorance. However, the difference can be found in relation to ignorance that is not associated with afflictive obscurations. As we can imagine, only the Buddha has perfectly abandoned this. So here, this point is illustrated with via 4 stories. In the history of the Buddha, when we consider the history of the Buddha, we also encounter stories of arhats, Modgayana, Shariputra. These are arhats in the foundational vehicle. And though they perfectly abandoned ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations, they still possess the second type of ignorance. And so through hearing these stories about the arhats, we'll be able to better understand what this type of ignorance is. Khelzang Puntso explains that there are 4 aspects. Ignorance refers to not knowing. It is a lack of knowledge. There are 4 types of lack of knowledge. Not knowing the qualities of the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. The second aspect of this ignorance that is not associated with afflictive obscurations and is not an obstacle to liberation is not knowing due to distance across space. The third is not knowing due to distance across time. And the fourth is not knowing due to the subtlety of phenomena. As these 4 aspects of ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations are connected with stories from the Buddha's life, then we will share these stories with you in order to better understand this type of ignorance. So let's begin. This is a story, it's more like a dialogue in a sense, between the Buddha and Shariputra. It's fairly simple. One day they were having a chat, the Buddha and Shariputra, and the Buddha asks Shariputra, "Tell me, you must surely know all of the uncommon qualities that I possess, the qualities of a Buddha." This refers to the 4 fearlessnesses, the 10 powers, the 18 unmixed qualities. I looked at the Ningpo Tempa, the edition published by Rapsol Editions by Shama Rinpoche. They're called the distinctive qualities in that edition. Anyway, the Buddha says to Shariputra, "Well, you must surely know these." And Shariputra thinks about it and realizes that he doesn't know them. And he, at this moment, sees a mental event that is a form of ignorance concerning this. And this mental event, well, what is it? It is ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations. This illustrates that Shariputra is the example in this case. An arhat has eliminated the first type of ignorance, that associated with afflictive obscurations, but they have not eliminated the second type, that which is dissociated from afflictive obscurations. So, just as a reminder, there's one type of ignorance that is an obstacle to liberation, and a second type that is not an obstacle to liberation, and that arhats have not eliminated. Okay, so this brings us to the second type of, well, the second story that will illustrate the presence of a type of ignorance for arhats that is not present for Buddha. So when we talk about ignorance here, once again, this is really not knowing something. It's not like a veil or something. It's not knowing something. And here we're talking about not knowing something due to distance across space. We don't know a phenomenon or an object because it's too far away. It's much too far. We cannot know it, have knowledge of it. And there is a story that illustrates this. And a story that illustrates this difference between arhats and the Buddha. So in this story, there was the Buddha, and then his second disciple after Shariputra was Modgayana. It's hard to say and even longer to write down. Modgaya. Nah. There are several ways of pronouncing it, apparently. Silva says Modgayana. The written version I have has one less syllable. In any case, Modgayana's mother had passed away, and he was concerned for her. He wanted to know where she had been reborn. It's important to know that he was an arhat who was extremely skilled in miracles of various types. In several sutras, we can see stories of Modgayana accomplishing miracles. The Buddha requesting of Modgayana to perform miracles. He had a great capacity for this, apparently. And so due to these capacities, he tried to see the place where his mother had been reborn. He was searching the world, several worlds, 1,000 worlds, 1,000 times, 1,000 worlds, many worlds, many universes. He searched through the limits of his perception in terms of distance. And despite this, he was unable to find his mother, to find where she had been reborn. So he went to ask the Buddha, who, for his part, his vision was limitless. The Buddha searched innumerable worlds, and of course, in the end, found Modgayana's mother. She had been reborn in a universe called Zhongchup Uzer Chen, apparently, which translates to luminous enlightenment. That's the name of the world where she was reborn. Sounds nice. here we can see that though Madhyayana was an arhat, he still had a form of lack of knowledge, still had a form of ignorance. He couldn't know this place. And so this ignorance is ignorance that is due to distance across space. It's too far. Distance is the cause of not knowing. This brings us to the third type of lack of knowledge. The third ignorance in question is ignorance due to distance across time. It is not knowing something that is far away in terms of time. So this concerns a householder by the name of Pelgin, which is translated as generous. That's his name. So this householder worked in the fields. He worked a lot every day. Apparently he lived a hard life. He worked hard every day, and when he got home in the evening, his wife was generally very reproachful. He did not have an easy life. One day, after coming home after a day of hard labor, his wife was once again reproaching him, and it was not easy. He went out to get some fresh air, and he encountered a monk on the road. And when he saw the monk, he thought, oh, this monk has such a simple life. He doesn't have any family drama. He just eats whatever people give him. And he thought, I will become a monk. Maybe this is the Nyejung we've talked about. He wanted to become a monk, so he asked the monk, so how do I become a monk? And the monk told him to go see the Buddha. So this person, Pelgin, generous, went to the place where the Buddha was at the time and his community. And on first glance, it wasn't that easy to go see the Buddha. There were quite a lot of people. So the first person that generous encountered was Shariputra. Not so bad, but in any case, it's a little bit like going through security at the airport. Shariputra asked him various questions. He wanted to get to know him. He wanted to know what brought him there. So Generous explained to Shariputra that he wanted to become a monk. And Shariputra said to him, in order to become a monk, it's necessary to have the seed of enlightenment. It's a little bit like when you go to university. If you want to enter the university, you have to pay your entrance fees. You can't just show up empty-handed. Similarly, when you arrive to become a monk, you have to possess the cause that could ripen at the very least, taking monastic vows. This is called the seed of liberation, apparently. Shariputra also had a great capacity, great extrasensory abilities. He entered into meditative absorption, entered into samadhi, and he looked into Generous's past to see if he could find this seed of liberation, this cause that can ripen in taking monk's vows. He looked in his present life, his past life, the life before that, through 4 recent lives, and he doesn't find it. And so Shariputra does not accept Generous into the Buddha's Sangha. And so Generous heads home and thinks to himself, well, there's nothing left to do but die, I guess. And the Buddha, in his omniscience, sees what's happened. So he sends Shariputra to go get Generous. And when Generous is there before the Buddha, the Buddha explains that he has an unlimited knowledge of past lives, and he can go much further through Generous's past lives, and he searches through many of Generous's past lives, and indeed finds that Generous has the seed of liberation. It occurred during a lifetime when Generous was a pig. Some of you may be familiar with this story. His owners in that lifetime wanted to eat him, wanted to kill this pig, and so the pig, Generous, ran away, and in his escape he ran around a stupa that contained the relics of the past Buddha. And through this act, the necessary cause, the seed of liberation, was obtained. And so the Buddha accepted Generous into the Sangha. And this story illustrates the fact that the Shariputra was not able to see far enough back in time and able to find this event, whereas the Buddha was able to see much further back in an unlimited way. In case you might be wondering, somebody asked a question about this seed of liberation. Somebody asked Khelzang Puntso a question about this. It seems a little weird that this individual has developed, seems like strong, Nyejung, and go to see the Buddha, and then Shariputra says, no, you can't come in here. And it's the fact that he ran around a stupa zillions of lifetimes ago without any intention is what qualifies as the seed of liberation. So how can it be that it was necessary to go back so far in his lifetimes to find the seed of liberation when he had expressed this positive nijung already in this life? And Khelzang Puntso's answer was quite interesting. He told us that when an act is enacted, we cannot know when its result will come to fruition. Yes, the act of wishing to join the Buddha's Sangha was very positive, but we cannot know when the conditions will occur for it to come to fruition. And in fact, what was necessary was a cause that was able to ripen at that moment. And in this particular story, that was this instance of being a pig and running around a stupa. This brings us to the next story. Since you were talking about causes, finding causes in previous lives, the whole system of causes and fruits and, conditions, ripening, all of this will be explained, will come in later chapters. And the system of cause and fruit is explained in the second chapter. And it's very precise. So the fourth aspect of this ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations, this one is not knowing due to the subtlety of phenomena, due to a lack of precision in the mind. This is a type of ignorance that is present for arhats, but not for the Buddha. As with the first 3 points, this point is accompanied by a story that illustrates this type of ignorance. This one is the story of noble Rahula. And when we put the word noble before someone's name, it refers to an arhat. It means the individual, the person in question, has attained arhathood. And Khelzang Puntso added for us, there were 2 Rahulas in the Buddha's community. There was one who was the Buddha's son, and another who was not. And he just added that he wasn't sure which one this story concerns. In any case, the type of ignorance, this 4th type of ignorance, is illustrated by this story with Rahula and the Buddha. Rahula was a part of the Buddha's entourage. He was there in the assembly one day, and there was a peacock that appeared. And when he saw it, Rahula asked himself the question, a few questions. He thought to himself, what is the cause of all the nuances of color that we can see in the peacock's feathers? What is the cause, or what are the actions that are at the root of all of these different colors? And is it indeed acts that are responsible for these different colors? And if it is, then which ones? And among the assembly, there were disciples who asked Rahula these questions. What are the acts that caused the peacock to have these feathers with so many colors, with such different colors? And Rahula was able to answer that first question, that yes, the colors appeared based on acts. The results indeed occur based on acts. That he was able to confirm without a doubt. However, he was unable to precisely identify which acts were responsible for the colors of the peacock. And the only one who was able to identify these acts with certainty was the Buddha. Of course, also with the adjacent points that if the Buddha couldn't identify them, then nobody could. So they went and asked the Buddha the question, and he answered very clearly, very precisely. He gave an explanation of each of the acts responsible for each of the nuances of color of the peacock's feathers. And then those in the assembly, notably the arhats, were able to observe that there was a difference between the knowledge of an arhat and the knowledge of a Buddha. Arhats still possess this ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscuration. The arhats still have it, whereas the Buddha is free from these 4 types of ignorance that we just went over. Now we might ask ourselves a question: what is the difference between these 2 types of ignorance? Ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations and ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations. And the answer is, well, it starts by saying both are ignorances. Both prevent knowledge. Except that one prevents liberation, ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations, and the other does not prevent liberation, ignorance dissociated from afflictive obscurations. It doesn't prevent liberation, but it prevents omniscience, the knowledge of all phenomena, which is present for a Buddha. So this concludes the explanations of the first 3 lines of the first stanza. These 3 lines correspond with the homage. So we've looked at the finality, or the point of the homage. We looked at the condensed meaning of the homage, and we looked at the explanation of the words. And then we presented the points of debate. Debates concerning the difference between a listener Pratyekya or Pratyekya Buddha Arhat and an Arhat who is a Buddha. So we saw that the difference concerns the difference lies in this ignorance. There is a difference in terms of knowledge or understanding. A Buddha who has perfect abandonment and perfect understanding. This perfect abandonment and perfect understanding are what we call perfect personal benefit. These are the 2 characteristics of the personal benefit of a Buddha. He has abandoned everything and understood everything. Abandoned everything that is to be abandoned. It's understood. We said there were 5 points in Vasubandhu's explanations. I propose we take a little break before we go on to the 5th point. I'm going to try to go a little more slowly for the translators. Following what we've just looked at, so we explained the, well, Sylvester just went over it, but let's do it again. We looked at the finality of the homage, the condensed meaning, the meaning of the words, and a point of discussion. And now, according to Vasubandhu, we need to connect to what follows. The explanations that we received are very brief. After what we just covered, Vasubandhu doesn't leave things there. He continues by formulating a promise to complete the composition of the text. After the first three, the fourth line says, "I will now perfectly state this treatise, that is the treasure of the Abhidharma." So this concludes the explanations of the first stanza, which includes the homage and the promise of composition. I propose that we continue on to the second stanza. The second stanza says, "The Abhidharma is immaculate discernment and its entourage, as well as what allows for obtaining it, and the treatises. As the meaning of the Abhidharma is perfectly included here, and the Abhidharma is the foundation for it, this treatise is the treasure of the Abhidharma." Concerning this second stanza, we might ask ourselves, what is the Abhidharma? And the second stanza answers this question, and in fact, somebody asked this question the other day. In the first two lines of the stanza, Vasubandhu presents the Abhidharma according to two different aspects. The first line refers to ultimate Abhidharma, and the second line refers to the Abhidharma that is in name only. So line 1, ultimate Abhidharma, and line 2, Abhidharma in name only. So first, let's talk about ultimate Abhidharma. The primary element when we talk about ultimate Abhidharma is discernment. Shera in Tibetan, prajna in Sanskrit. The discernment in question here is dissociated from factors for descent. That's this notion that we started getting into with the second point of the basis concerning the Vaibhashika view. This discernment is dissociated from factors for descent. And in the entourage of this element that is the Abhidharma, there are 5 aggregates, which are 5 aggregates dissociated from factors for descent. And so we can see that the 5 aggregates of its entourage are the aggregate of consciousness, we can also refer to it as primary mind, then the aggregate of sensation, the aggregate of distinction, the aggregate of conditioning phenomena, And concerning the aggregate of matter, the only element in the aggregate of matter dissociated from factors for descent, this is discipline dissociated from factors for descent. Dompa, which was previously translated as vows, but which we've chosen to refer to as discipline. We'll give lots of details on this in chapter 4. In any case, out of all of the aggregate of matter, this is the only thing that is dissociated from factors for descent. So there is this primary element, prajna, discernment, dissociated from factors for descent, and then in its entourage, there are these aspects of the 5 aggregates that are dissociated from factors for descent. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about ultimate Abhidharma. And so then Khelzang Puntso clarifies here, the aggregates are not always associated with factors for descent. They can be dissociated from factors for descent. And when we talk about the aggregates dissociated from factors for descent, it's in the case when, on the basis of these aggregates, afflictive obscurations cannot develop. This discernment, dissociated from factors for descent, we may ask ourselves, what does it discern? What is it focused on? It is focused on, it directly sees the mode of being of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones. This discernment that directly perceives the mode of being of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones is this discernment dissociated from factors for descent, and it is what we call ultimate Abhidharma. This includes the path of seeing, the path of meditation or familiarization or cultivation, and the path of no more learning. Which, as you may recall, we explained that on the basis of these, afflictive obscurations cannot develop. And here, Khelzang Puntso introduces another element. When we talk about the path of meditation, this can refer to 2 paths. There is a worldly path of meditation and a supra-worldly path of meditation that we will we'll cover this topic in detail later. Of course, in this context, we are referring to the super-worldly path of familiarization or meditation. On these paths, the beings on these paths are in contact with or possess ultimate Abhidharma. The discernment dissociated from factors for descent and its entourage, in other words, the 5 aggregates dissociated from factors for descent. Now we can look at the second line, which refers to Abhidharma in name only. So ultimate Abhidharma is the true Abhidharma, and Abhidharma in name only refers to 3 types of discernment. Discernment based on listening, discernment arising from listening, discernment arising from reflection or contemplation, and discernment arising from meditation. And in the context of the paths, it refers to discernment that is practiced on the path of accumulation and the path of junction. So the discernment arising from listening, reflection, and meditation on the path of accumulation, and discernment arising from listening, reflection, and meditation on the path of junction. These discernments, as they are, these discernments are still associated with factors for descent. Nevertheless, they are Abhidharma in name only. And this second aspect also includes the treatises. The treatises are also Abhidharma in name only. That refers to the Abhidharmakosha itself, the 7 great treatises of the Abhidharma that we have mentioned several times, and the Mahavibhasha, the treatise of great explanations. In short, Abhidharma in name only is the 3 discernments and the treatises. The first line concerns ultimate Abhidharma, true Abhidharma, and the second line refers to Abhidharma in name only, which is not the Abhidharma in and of itself. Nevertheless, there is a relationship of cause and effect. This Abhidharma in name only is the cause of ultimate Abhidharma. If we wish to actualize ultimate Abhidharma, this discernment that sees the mode of being of the 4 truths of the Noble Ones, we must apply the cause. And this cause is Abhidharma in name only, the discernments arising from listening, reflection, and meditation, and the treatises. It went kind of fast, apparently, from one, the whole thing, apparently. So we have looked at the first and second lines. The first line refers to ultimate Abhidharma. There's a little hiccup with the vocab in French, but we're all good. So the first line is ultimate Abhidharma. The second line refers to Abhidharma in name only. Abhidharma in name only corresponds with 3 discernments. Discernment arising from listening, discernment arising from reflection, and discernment arising from meditation, which are associated with factors for descent, but which are nevertheless the basis for, or the cause for, attaining ultimate Abhidharma. The first 2 lines allow us to understand the word Abhidharma in the title, Abhidharmakosha. Ultimate Abhidharma and Abhidharma in name only. And the 2 last lines of this stanza allow us to understand why we talk about a treasure, kosha. We saw that kosha in Sanskrit, or de in Tibetan, is treasure. And when the root text states, as the meaning of the Abhidharma is perfectly included here, and the Abhidharma is the foundation for it, this treatise is the treasure of the Abhidharma. So here we can see that the Abhidharma in name only, these 3 discernments and the treatises. And remember, if we look at, if we consider the various treatises that are cited, the 7 great treatises and the Mahavibhasha are included. The meaning of these treatises is included here. And so this text is a treasure. Just like a treasure is filled with riches, this text is filled with all of the Abhidharmas. That concludes the explanations of the 2nd stanza, which presents the meaning of the title of the treatise. The 3rd stanza that comes just after is gonna go over what we just looked at and then go into a bit more detail. Ultimate Abhidharma and Abhidharma in name only. But it's 3:45. I don't know if you have a lot of questions. You don't have to start shouting them out. It's protocol. If you have a question, can you please raise your hands so that we can see if there are a lot of questions or if we should go into the 3rd stanza. Okay. It seems like there's not a lot of questions, so we're gonna go into the stanza and we'll just leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So, the 3rd stanza. Without perfect discernment of phenomena, it is not possible to completely pacify the afflictive obscurations. It is due to the afflictive obscurations that worldly beings wander in the ocean of becoming. This is why, they say, the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it. This 3rd stanza will present several things. It presents the theme of the text. It presents the finality or purpose of the text. And it presents the ultimate finality of the text. And also a 4th point, which is the relationship between the first 3 points, the connections between them. The theme of this treatise, it's the study of phenomena, specifically knowable phenomena, and more specifically, phenomena associated with factors for descent and dissociated from factors for descent. That covers the theme. Then the finality of the text. What's the point? What's the purpose? Obtaining perfect discernment. We need this discernment. And the 3rd point, the ultimate finality, is to attain perfect peace, complete extinction of the afflictive obscurations. Of course, we cannot obtain liberation without discernment. And liberation is the ultimate finality. So that's the first 3 points presented in the stanza: the theme, the finality, and the ultimate finality. Then the 4th point will explain the connections, the links of cause and effect between the first 3 points. In order to obtain liberation, we need perfect discernment, uncontaminated discernment, or discernment dissociated from factors for descent. We need this discernment, this wisdom. In order to obtain this discernment, we need to listen, reflect, and meditate on phenomena associated with and dissociated from factors for descent. All of these phenomena are explained in Abhidharma in name only. In the 7 great treatises, but not only. I don't know why he cited those ones. Maybe somebody asked a question we couldn't hear. So this goes over what we saw in the previous stanza. Again, the study of the 7 great treatises added to discernment arising from listening, reflection, and meditation. That's one package. It's Abhidharma, relative Abhidharma, Abhidharma in name only. This will give rise to discernment dissociated from factors for descent. In other words, ultimate Abhidharma. This immaculate discernment or immaculate wisdom produces wisdom, gives rise to wisdom. I think we can leave things here because the next bit goes into more detail, which is interesting, but which goes over the ideas that we've seen. And when we go into detail, it allows for adding supplementary information. It adds new ideas, new notions that are explained in some details. The detail is the opportunity to introduce new ideas and give more detailed explanations, and the treatise kind of goes on in that way. So we have 10 minutes. If you have questions, we will try to answer them. It's not exactly a question. Can you just clarify something? You've talked a lot about the chapters. Are we still are we in a chapter yet, or are we not yet in a chapter? Nope, we haven't started the first chapter yet. We are in the 6 first stanzas of the text, which are introductory stanzas. The homage, the finality of the text, the presentation of the Abhidharma, what we've just covered. All of these things, the finality, the links between the more relative and ultimate finality, these are introductory points. We haven't concluded them yet. What we would have liked, Alexandra and I were hoping to conclude these introductory points, but it's not actually a bad thing. And the next time, you'll be able to go over this again, continue with the introduction. And the first chapter begins with the 7th stanza, which is at the bottom of the page that you have. Thank you so much for this presentation. Concerning the 2 types of ignorance, are there just 2 types of arhats? The listener arhats and the self-realized Buddha arhats? What about bodhisattvas? Are they free of this type of ignorance? The second one. Trick question. When we speak about the types of arhats, this refers to the 3 vehicles: the listener vehicle, the self-realized Buddha vehicle, and the bodhisattva vehicle, otherwise known as the Mahayana. In the context of the Mahayana, there will be 3 types of results: the arhat of the Shravakayana, the arhats of the Pratyekya Buddhayana, and what the practitioners of the Mahayana path hold is that the fruit of the Mahayana path is the state of perfect enlightenment, Buddhahood. But it's important to remember that that is the presentation according to the Mahayana. That's the explanations that we are often familiar with, that are found in the Jewel Ornament of Precious Liberation by Gampopa, but that's not the context here. This treatise is written from the point of view of the Vaibhashika. They present the Shravaka arhats, the Pratyekya Buddha arhats, and then the Buddha, which is a type of arhat. This is found in the 6th chapter. Should be in the 6th chapter. In the Abhidharma, the Buddha is considered a type of arhat, but he has supplementary qualities. We'll see in the text how these qualities are developed. There was a second part of your question, wasn't there? No, that was it? Okay. Thank you, also. I also had a question concerning arhats. You said there was a point of debate. Is there a difference between the state of Buddhahood and arhathood? And then you gave these 4 stories that illustrate the difference. And I was wondering if, well, do these 4 examples, these stories, come from Mahayana texts or from the foundational vehicle? What are the points of view on this objection? Here, for all of our studies of the Abhidharmakosha, we're not going to talk about the Mahayana. They're not elements that will come up. In our studies from 2015 to 2020, Khelzang Puntso may have referenced the Mahayana a handful of times, but otherwise, this study is in terms of, our studies here are in terms of the foundational vehicle from the Vaibhashika view, and they hold that there is a difference between arhats and the Buddha, and generally the sutras and various Hinayana texts are the reference point, but generally these references come from the sutras. I don't know how easy or hard it is to find them. The fact that the Buddha explained these things proves that this lack of knowledge, these various types of ignorance that are present for arhats, that are not present for Buddha, exist. And so that's the point of these stories. They show that that this ignorance exists, and as the stories illustrate it, it qualifies as proof, and there's no need to say anything further. That's the perspective. We talked about 5 aggregates dissociated from factors for descent. Among them was conditioning phenomena. I guess that probably refers to part of conditioning phenomena. So which ones? Among the conditioning phenomena, the factors for descent are presented there. From memory, I guess I'd say we're talking about conditioning phenomena associated by similarity. In fact, we didn't get details on it, but concerning the conditioning phenomena, that refers to mental events in terms of those associated by similarity with mind. And so it's possible that since ultimate Abhidharma refers to discernment, it's possible that this simply refers to discernment. But of course, yes, obviously all those that are afflicted are abandoned, and perhaps then this refers to the mental events of a primary mind with this discernment present. This is related to how mind functions in terms of with mental events associated with or dissociated from factors for descent. The details are given in chapter 2. When there is one who that is dissociated from factors from memory, when one is dissociated from factors for descent, then the 10 of the great basis are also. Just a clarification. Maybe I didn't write this down correctly, but what I understood is that for the Vaibhashika, clarification rather than a question, I understood that for the Vaibhashika, an arhat is someone who no longer has ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations. And again, the Vaibhashika consider that a Buddha is an arhat, but more. He has surpassed ignorance associated. He has surpassed ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations and dissociated from afflictive obscuration. And then somewhere in all of this, one of you said there's a difference between the two ignorances. Both prevent something, one doesn't prevent something. Can you fill it in for me? The first part, yes, concerning possessing ignorance or not, whether one is an arhat or a Buddha. Yes, that's how things were defined. That's the information that we have now. There will be more information later on as we continue with our studies. And to come back to your notes. Ignorance associated with afflictive obscurations prevents liberation. We'll cover this in more detail later, but for now this is the information that's given. But there'll be more information later. And ignorance that is not associated with afflictive obscurations, this one prevents omniscience. In other words, knowing everything. And likewise, for the moment, that's just stated like that, but a lot more information comes later. In the second preamble, the scriptural sources were mentioned, the 7 great treatises and the Mahavibhasha. But what were the sources of these treatises? Are there sutras, things stated by the Buddha that were then resulted in these treatises and the Mahavibhasha? In fact, that's the point we left off at. This is why they say the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it. So this is the teaser trailer for next session. Here we get a Maransik. This is why they say the instructor stated this in order to liberate them from it. And here, Vasubandhu, what we translate as they say, shows that Vasubandhu differentiates himself from the Vaibhashika school. In the way that Vasubandhu composed the Abhidharmakosha, there are certain parts of the text. The whole text is presented according to the Vaibhashika view, but every now and then he adds a little grammatic particle that's a disagreement. And there's one of them here. And so next time we will answer your question according to the Vaibhashika and according to the Sachansaka concerning where these treatises originally come from. It's time. If you have a moment, we will dedicate, of course. Also, just to not dedicate and walk out, this is the end of our 5-day marathon. I won't say much more. I think we can just keep in mind what Rinpoché said to us yesterday concerning this exercise of studying together. Of course, we've already benefited, all of us two, from our studies of the entry to the state of a Pandita. But the fact of getting up here and, carrying out this exercise of presenting, I don't know, this is probably going to be really awkward, but what Rinpoché does to make these conditions for us to study possible is precious beyond words. We all know what the dedication is for, but I guess what I can say in my mind, in my heart, is to keep in mind Karmapa's activity, Shama Rinpoche's activity, Jigmé Rinpoche's activity that allows us to study in this way. So I think, of course, that's what we're all doing here together. Thank you for these 5 days.
Sanam di tamshe zikbani topne nyepe chanam panjene kiega nachi palab chukpayi sipet sole trewa le shon.